You pulled the last bulb out of the ground. You shook the dirt off the roots, laid the garlic down in a row to dry, and stood up straight. Your back ached a little. You looked at the bed and felt something strange. It was empty. Just dark, open soil. A rectangle of nothing, sitting there in the middle of July with weeks and weeks of warm weather still ahead. And you thought what almost every gardener thinks in that moment. Well, I'll let it rest until next year. That thought, right there, is the most expensive mistake you'll make all season. Not expensive in money, expensive in food, in flavor, in everything that could have grown in that space between now and the first frost. But before we talk about what you should do with that bed, you need to understand something that will completely change the way you see it. That patch of ground is not ordinary soil right now. It never was. Here's what happened under the surface while your garlic was growing. Garlic is one of the most chemically active plants in any garden. For months, its roots were releasing compounds called phytoncides, natural antimicrobial substances that the plant produces to defend itself. These compounds don't just protect the garlic, they spread into the surrounding soil and act like a slow, gentle disinfectant, suppressing harmful bacteria, discouraging mold, pushing back the invisible pathogens that weaken other plants. By the time you pulled those bulbs out, your soil had been through a months-long purification process. The fungal diseases that plague tomatoes, the bacterial rot that destroys carrots, the microscopic enemies of almost every vegetable. Many of them were suppressed, crowded out, weakened by the garlic's invisible chemistry. In other words, the bed you're looking at right now is cleaner than it was before you planted. It's healthier. It's more alive in the ways that matter, and less alive in the ways that harm. Gardeners who know this don't see an empty bed after garlic. They see a gift. And there's a second thing working in your favor, something physical, not chemical. Garlic grows deep. Its roots reach down and break up compacted soil, creating tiny channels through which air and water can move. After harvest, those channels remain. The structure of the soil is looser, more porous, better drained than it was in spring. Anything you plant now will send its own roots down into a bed that's already been prepared at a level no spade can fully replicate. So, you have clean soil. You have aerated soil. You have warm soil. July and August soil holds heat that April soil won't see for months. Now the real question, what do you do with it? The answer depends entirely on one number. How many days do you have left before your first hard frost? This is the number that determines everything: what you can plant, what you'll harvest, and how to plan the next 8 to 12 weeks. If you don't know your average first frost date, stop right now and look it up. Type in your city, your region, your nearest weather station. Get a date. Count the days. Got it? Now I want you to hold that number in your head, because I'm going to give you a system built around 3 windows. If you have 80 to 90 days before frost, you are sitting in the most enviable position a mid-season gardener can be in. You have time for nearly everything. Almost every summer and autumn vegetable fits inside that window, and you can plan 2 or even 3 successive plantings before the season ends. If you have 60 to 70 days, you're still in strong shape. You'll need to be a little more selective. Some slower crops won't make it, but your list is still longer than most people expect. You have time for real harvests, not just survival greens. If you have fewer than 50 days, don't panic. Don't walk away from that bed. There are crops specifically designed, through centuries of cultivation, to sprint from seed to table in under 7 weeks. Fast, cold-tolerant, productive even in short gray days. You still have options that will surprise you. Keep your number in mind. We're about to go through 7 crops, each one matched to those windows, each one chosen specifically for a bed that's just come off garlic. And one of them, a root vegetable with a history that goes back to ancient Egypt, is so perfectly suited to garlic's soil chemistry that planting it here isn't just convenient. It's almost as if the two plants were designed to follow each other. But we'll get to that. First, let's start with the fastest thing you can put in the ground, something you can be eating in 3 weeks, and the counterintuitive reason why planting it now, in midsummer, actually gives you a better result than planting it in April ever did. Radish and daikon, the sprinters. Radish is the fastest vegetable in the garden. Most varieties go from seed to table in 20 to 30 days. Cherry Belle, Saxa, French breakfast, all of them sprint. But here's the thing that surprises most gardeners. Radish planted in late July or early August is actually better than radish planted in April. Why? Because radish has one enemy: long days. When the days are long, 14, 15, 16 hours of sunlight, radish panics. It reads that light signal as a warning that summer is ending and it needs to reproduce before winter. So instead of putting energy into the root, it sends up a flower stalk. The root turns woody and bitter, almost inedible. Gardeners call this bolting, and it ruins spring radish crops all the time. But in late July, the days are already getting shorter. By the time your radish seeds germinate and establish themselves, the day length is dropping fast. The plant has no reason to bolt. It stays calm, stays vegetative, puts everything into that crisp, peppery root you actually want to eat. Your July radish will outperform your April radish almost every time. Sow them densely, about 2 to 3 centimeters apart, in rows 15 centimeters apart. Thin to 5 centimeters once they sprout. Water consistently. Radish skin cracks when watering is irregular. And harvest the moment the shoulder of the root pushes up through the soil. Daikon deserves its own sentence. This is the long white Japanese radish that can reach 40 or 50 centimeters underground, and it does something radish can't. It breaks hardpan. Its taproot drives straight down through compacted subsoil, opening channels that will benefit everything you plant in this bed next spring. It's not just a vegetable, it's a tool. Daikon takes 50 to 60 days, so it fits the 60-plus window comfortably, and you can leave it in the ground through light frosts. It only gets sweeter. The greens, faster in August than in May. Here is something that confuses new gardeners every single year. They plant lettuce in May, it bolts in June. They plant spinach in spring, it shoots up a flower stalk before they get a single serious harvest. They give up on these crops. Then they discover that the same plants, sown in late July or August, grow beautifully, lush, productive, slow to bolt, flavorful in ways the spring versions never were. The reason is the same as with radish: shorter days, cooler nights. These plants evolved in temperate climates where autumn is their natural growing season, and when you give them autumn conditions, they behave the way they were designed to. Leaf lettuce, not head lettuce, leaf varieties, reaches harvest size in 25 to 35 days. Plant it now, and you'll be cutting leaves in August. Sow it again in 3 weeks, and you'll have a second flush in September. Varieties like Lalo Rosa, Oak Leaf, and Batavian are particularly heat-tolerant and will give you a longer window before frost slows them down. Spinach is in a category of its own when it comes to cold tolerance. It handles temperatures down to -5 degrees Celsius without protection. You can sow spinach in August, let it establish through September, and harvest leaves well into October, or even later if you cover the bed with a simple floating row cover. The plant essentially pauses rather than dies when temperatures drop, and resumes growing whenever a mild day arrives. Sow thickly, about 2 centimeters apart, and harvest by cutting outer leaves rather than pulling whole plants. Arugula germinates in 4 to 5 days and reaches a workable size in 3 weeks. It's spicy, nutritious, and almost foolproof. Mustard greens are similarly fast and similarly underused. Pak choi, the Asian brassica with thick white stems and dark green leaves, reaches harvest in 30 to 40 days and is extraordinary stir-fried or braised. All of these belong in your post-garlic bed. Scatter them, mix them, sow them in blocks rather than rows if you like. They don't need much space between plants. They just need consistent moisture and the shortening days that July and August deliver. Beetroot, the one that was made for this bed. Now we get to the crop I promised you at the end of part 1. Beetroot and garlic share something unusual among vegetables. They prefer soil with a slightly alkaline pH, somewhere around 6.5 to 7. Most vegetables are more tolerant of acidity. Beets and garlic both do best when the soil is closer to neutral, and they both struggle when it tips toward acidic. This means that a bed which was well prepared for garlic, limed if necessary, balanced, with the pH adjusted for those bulbs, is already at the exact pH that beetroot wants. You don't need to do anything extra. The soil chemistry is already dialed in. Choose fast-maturing varieties: Egyptian Flat, Boltardi, Detroit, Dark Red, Bordeaux. These are 50 to 60-day varieties that will reach full size before a September or October frost in most growing zones. Sow the seeds about 3 centimeters deep and 10 centimeters apart. Here's a detail most gardeners miss. What looks like a single beetroot seed is actually a cluster of 2 or 3 seeds fused together. Almost every seed you plant will produce multiple seedlings. Thin them early, down to 1 plant per station, or they'll compete and you'll end up with a tangle of small, misshapen roots. Water regularly, especially in the first 3 weeks. Once the roots begin to develop, beetroot becomes remarkably drought-tolerant. The leaves are edible too. Young beet greens are tender, slightly earthy, and one of the most nutritious things your garden can produce. Don't waste them. Carrots for bunching. Not what you think most gardeners hear carrot and think slow. 3 or 4 months. Difficult. Demands deep, perfectly stone-free soil. Not worth it mid-season. They're thinking of large storage carrots. That's not what we're doing here. Bunching carrots, the kind you see at farmers' markets with their feathery tops still attached, pulled young at finger thickness, take 50 to 55 days. They're not trying to build a long taproot. They're going for quick, sweet, slender roots that are actually more tender and flavorful than their fully mature counterparts. Prepare the row by working in a little river sand along the planting line. Not bags of play sand, river sand, which is coarser and improves drainage without compacting. Sow seeds thinly, cover with a thin layer of that same sand rather than soil, and water gently. The sand crust prevents the hard surface cap that often blocks carrot germination in heavy soils. After germination, keep the bed mulched. Carrot roots are chasing moisture, and if the top of the soil dries out and rehydrates in an uneven cycle, the roots will crack or fork. Consistent moisture and a thin mulch of straw or grass clippings will give you straight, smooth bunching carrots in under 8 weeks. Dill and parsley, the ones you'll use every single day, dill is almost embarrassingly easy. Seeds to usable greenery in 10 to 14 days if you know one trick. The problem with dill germination is that the seeds are coated in volatile oils, the same oils that give dill its distinctive scent. Those oils, in high concentration around the seed itself, actually inhibit germination. The plant is essentially poisoning its own seeds, which sounds counterproductive, but evolved as a timing mechanism to prevent germination in dry conditions. The fix is simple. Soak your dill seeds in warm water for 24 hours before planting. The water washes away those inhibiting oils. Germination time drops from 10 to 14 days down to 5 to 7. For a plant that's already fast, that's a meaningful difference. Scatter the seeds thinly, press them lightly into the surface. Dill needs light to germinate, so don't bury them. And water gently. You'll see green within a week. Parsley is slower, 40 to 60 days to a usable size, but worth starting now because it's biennial. It will overwinter in mild climates and come back stronger in spring. The same soaking trick applies. Parsley's essential oils inhibit its own germination even more aggressively than dill's. Soak for a full 24 hours, change the water once midway through, and your germination rate will nearly double. Cabbage, the one that stores winter inside itself. Chinese cabbage, also called Napa cabbage, forms a full head in 40 to 50 days and is one of the most cold-tolerant of the fast brassicas. It does have one quirk. When temperatures stay above 25 degrees Celsius consistently, it struggles and can bolt. If you're planting in peak summer heat, give it partial shade in the afternoon. The shadow of a taller plant, a temporary shade cloth, anything that drops the temperature by a few degrees during the hottest hours. Late-season heading cabbage, varieties like Kolobuk, Amager, or Zimovka, is a different project. These are 60 to 100-day varieties that form dense, heavy heads specifically designed for fermentation and winter storage. If you have 80 or more days before your frost date, planting a row of late cabbage now means a harvest of tight, mature heads in October. Heads you can shred, ferment into sauerkraut, and eat through the winter. The garlic bed's loose, well-aerated soil is ideal for brassica root development. Beans, the crop that improves your soil while feeding you bush beans, are a special case. They produce a real, substantial harvest in 50 days, pods you can eat fresh, freeze, or dry. But they also do something none of the other crops on this list can do. They fix nitrogen from the air directly into the soil. Legumes, beans, peas, clover, host specific bacteria in nodules on their roots. Those bacteria convert atmospheric nitrogen into a form that plants can absorb. When the bean plant dies and its roots decompose, that nitrogen stays in the soil, available for whatever you plant next spring. So planting beans after garlic isn't just about harvesting beans. It's about investing in next year's soil fertility. It's two benefits for the cost of one planting. Choose fast bush varieties. Provider, Contender, or Strike are all reliable 50-day options. Sow seeds 5 centimeters deep, 15 centimeters apart in rows, and don't overwater after germination. Beans prefer slightly drier conditions than most vegetables, and will drop their flowers if the soil stays waterlogged. Before you plant anything, 3 steps you cannot skip. The garlic bed is ready. The soil is clean and aerated. But there are 3 things to do before a single seed goes in. First, remove every piece of garlic root you can find. Garlic root fragments left in soil can harbor disease, and they also compete chemically with young seedlings. Rake through the bed thoroughly. Second, water deeply the day before you plant. Not on planting day, the day before. You want the moisture to move down through the soil, not pool on the surface and wash seeds away. Deep watering the day before planting gives you a perfectly moist seedbed without a wet, compacted surface. Third, work in potassium and phosphorus. Wood ash from your fire pit is perfect. It's rich in both minerals and slightly alkaline, which reinforces the pH that garlic already optimized. A double handful per square meter, raked in lightly. No fresh nitrogen fertilizers. Those push leafy growth at the expense of roots and speed, which is the opposite of what you want from a mid-season planting. Do those three things, and every crop on this list will have the best possible start. Now, you have the crops, you have the preparation. But here's what you still need: a clear, simple plan that tells you exactly which of these to choose based on how many days you're working with. Because a gardener with 90 days and a gardener with 45 days are not running the same race. And getting that match right is the difference between a full autumn harvest and a bed full of half-grown plants caught by frost. If you have more than 80 days, you are in the best position of any gardener reading this right now. Stop and appreciate that for a moment, because 80+ days from a mid-July starting point is an extraordinary window. Here's what you do. Plant everything. The full list. Beans for nitrogen and fresh pods. Late-season white cabbage for sauerkraut in November. Daikon to break your subsoil and fill your winter pickle jar. Beetroot in 2 successions, one sowing now, one sowing in 3 weeks, so that you harvest a first wave in September and a second wave in October. Bunching carrots mid-August. Chinese cabbage in the partial shade of your taller plants. Greens scattered everywhere, there's a gap. Spinach, arugula, mustard, leaf lettuce in rotating bands. At your pace, the post-garlic bed doesn't just feed you through autumn. It feeds you into early winter. You have time for succession planting, which is the real secret of experienced gardeners. Instead of planting everything at once and being overwhelmed by a single massive harvest, you stagger sowings 2 or 3 weeks apart so that the harvests stagger too. A constant supply, not a glut. Start with radish and greens this week. Add beetroot and beans next week. Carrots and cabbage the week after. Then circle back to a second round of greens and radish. Your bed will look like a living calendar. Different crops at different stages, something always ready to pick. If you have 60 to 80 days, this is still a generous window, and the adjustments are smaller than you might expect. Take late-season white cabbage off the list. Those dense storage heads need a full 80 to 100 days to form properly, and a frost will catch them before they close. Everything else stays. Beans are borderline. 50 days is technically inside the window, but beans are sensitive to early frosts, and you'll want some buffer. If your autumn is typically dry and mild, plant them. If your first frost date is reliable and sharp, skip the beans and give that space to a second sowing of beetroot instead. Your focus in this window should be on 3 things: beetroot, the full range of greens, and Chinese cabbage. These are your highest value crops per square meter for the days you have. Beetroot, because it stores well and pays dividends long after harvest. Greens, because they produce continuously and tolerate cold. Chinese cabbage, because a single well-grown head can serve your table for a week. Radish and dill go in immediately. They're so fast, they don't even need discussion. While you're waiting for those to sprint, prep the sections of the bed for the longer crops and get them in the ground within the first week. If you have 40 to 60 days, here's where most gardeners make the wrong call. They look at the number, they feel the anxiety of a shortening season, and they do nothing. They tell themselves it's not worth it. It is absolutely worth it. In 40 to 60 days, you can harvest radish twice, a full crop in 3 weeks, then a second planting immediately after for another crop before frost. You can grow enough leaf lettuce to eat salad every day through September. You can fill a basket with arugula and mustard greens. You can grow Chinese cabbage to full head size. And you can harvest spinach right up to the edge of your frost date, and then cover it with row fabric and keep harvesting for another 2 or 3 weeks beyond that. What comes off the list in this window? Beetroot is marginal. If you plant immediately and choose the fastest variety, Boltardi or Egyptian flat, you may get small but usable roots. Daikon is out. Beans are out. Late carrots are out, though you can still do a short succession of bunching carrots if you start them in the first 5 days. The crops to prioritize right now, in this order: radish first, then spinach and leaf lettuce, then arugula, pak choi, and Chinese cabbage. Dill goes in this week because it asks for nothing and gives you something to put on everything. Parsley goes in now too. It won't reach full size in this window, but it will survive the winter in most climates and give you a strong spring plant for free. Think of the 40 to 60-day window not as a shortened season, but as a different season. A focused, fast, green, abundant season. If you have fewer than 40 days, I'm not going to tell you the bed isn't worth planting. I'm going to tell you the truth, which is more useful. Your options are narrower, but they are real. Radish, leaf lettuce, dill, spinach with row cover. That's your list. 4 crops, all of them fast, all of them cold tolerant, all of them genuinely productive in the time you have. Radish will give you a full harvest before your frost date. Leaf lettuce will give you weeks of daily picking. Dill, after that 24-hour soak, will be on your table in 10 days. And spinach, particularly if you cover it with a floating row cover at night, will keep producing past your first frost, past your second frost, into a part of the year when almost nothing else in the garden is alive. 4 crops doesn't sound like much until you're standing at the kitchen counter in October with a bowl of your own fresh greens, your own radishes, your own herbs, and you remember that 2 months ago that bed was just sitting there, empty. The number that changes how you see every empty bed. Here's the thing I want to leave you with. Not a fact about soil chemistry or germination rates. Something simpler. Every square meter of garden space that sits idle from July to October is not just unused. It has a cost. A single square meter of well-managed post-garlic bed, planted, tended, harvested in succession, can produce between 20 and 30 kilograms of food between midsummer and the first hard frost. 20 to 30 kilograms. From 1 square meter. In the time most gardeners spend looking at empty ground. That's beetroot you didn't buy. That's salad leaves you didn't buy. That's radishes and greens and herbs and carrots that came from your own soil, soil that garlic already cleaned and opened and prepared for exactly this purpose. The empty bed doesn't feel like a loss. It feels neutral. It feels like rest. But it isn't rest. Rest is something you do after effort. An empty bed in summer isn't resting. It's waiting for a reason that never comes. Weeds fill it instead. The structure the garlic built slowly collapses under rain and heat. The biological activity that the phytoncides encouraged fades without new roots to support it. A bed after garlic isn't waiting. It's ready. And ready means now. One question before you go I want to know. What are you planting, and how many days do you have? Leave your answer in the comments. Not because I need the information, because writing it down makes it real. Because the moment you type, I have 65 days and I'm planting beetroot and spinach, you've made a decision. You've committed. And tomorrow morning, instead of walking past that empty bed again, you'll be standing in front of it with seeds in your hand. That's the whole point. If this gave you something useful, if you looked at that empty bed differently by the end, give this video a like. It tells me to keep making content like this, and it helps other gardeners find it before their windows close. Subscribe if you haven't already. Every week we go deep on one practical problem in the kitchen garden, without shortcuts and without filler. And next week, we're going underground. How to store beetroot and carrots through winter so that what you harvest in October is still perfect in February. The temperature, the humidity, the containers, the mistakes that turn a perfect root into mush in 6 weeks. All of it, in detail. The harvest is just the beginning.